So welcome back. Nice to have you again. So in today's session, we'll learn about exceptions in Python. So let's get started. So what is exception? So exception means when there is a specific logic of code that breaks. So for example, let's say we have num1 equal to 7 and we'll say num2 equal to 0. So when we try to divide these two numbers, let's say print and I'll say num1 by num2. So if I run this code, you will see that we'll get an exception because this is not possible, right? We cannot divide 7 by 0. So in that case, our code breaks. It throws an exception and says zero division error, and it says division by zero is not possible. So here, zero division error exception, it's a built-in exception. So there are a bunch of exceptions that can be thrown by Python. So let's list all them. So to list them, we can say print, we can use this dir function, and then inside this dir function, we can say locals. Locals will give us all the built-in modules and all, and we can say here in string, we can say built-ins. Okay, so let's run this code. So if you can see, like when I run this code, this print never executes, right? Because our code breaks here and it doesn't go forward again. So there's a problem of exception. So now let's comment this and let's run this code again. So now we'll have all this type of different exception that can be thrown by our Python code. So all these exceptions are built-in exception, arithmetic error, assertion error, attribution error, etc. We'll learn more about exceptions in the next section. We'll also learn about user-defined exception and all. But for now, how can we handle this type of exception? Like let's say when I say print num1 by num2. So when I run this code, I want to print learn with Pratap. So how can we handle this? So I want my code, even if this fails, I want to run this code. How can we do that? So in order to do that, any Python code that may throw exception, we need to add them inside this try except block. So something will be here and we'll say except. So here let's put this inside this try. So we put this print inside this try and let's print the exception here. So let's say I cannot divide. Okay. So let's run this code again. So now you see, even though this num1 by num2 throws an exception, we're able to handle it, like we have handled it, and the block of code goes on to the next line, right? So we're able to print this. So this way we can handle the exception. So here we can accept the specific exception. So in this case, we can get zero division error exception, like let's say E. So if I say just this one, if I can, like if I run this code again, you can see we just have this, I cannot divide, but we don't know what exactly the error was, right? So we can accept this and extract it as E. So now I'll say I cannot divide E. So we'll get the message here, okay? So let's run this code. So now you see it says I cannot divide division by 0. This way we are getting a exception. So now let's say we have another list. Let's say list, my list, and it will have just two items, 1 and 2. And if I try to, like, let me just comment this, and if I try to print the my list of third index, it doesn't exist, right? So in that case, if I run this code, it throws an error and it doesn't continue because we try to catch the error only for this zero division by error, right? We want to catch the error for this specific. So for that we can say except. So we can say here the index error. We can say index error as E, and you can say print E. Let's run this code. So now you see we have list index out of range. So this way we can get specific errors. Okay. Also we have an else block here. We have else print I am else. So when will this run? If you see, it doesn't go to the else, right? Because there was some exception. So in this case, let's say just 2. Let's run. So it doesn't go in the exception, right? Let me comment this part and let me try an exception again. So when will this else block execute? Like let's say let's write it correctly. So we have this list one. And let's run this code. So now you see we have this I am else also. So if we have anything inside this try block and it doesn't throw any exception, so in that case it will go to the else block. Okay, and then we also have another finally. So finally, let's print I am finally. So let me run this code. And you see, we have this finally. This finally will run even there if there is an exception or if there is no exception. So in that case, let's try to try an exception. Let's say this. So you see, we have this finally blocks been executed. So let me run this code again. Now we have a well working code, right? So let's learn what exactly we have learned in this exception section. So block of code may throw an exception. To handle those exceptions, we can use this try except. Okay. So here we can use a specific exception, or we can get all the exception in once by saying exception. Let's say E. Let's say print E. Okay. So here, if there is any index error, like if there is any index error exception, then this except block will catch that. If there is any zero division error exception, then this block of code will check. If we don't handle the exception for a specific type of exception, then that will go into this exception block, because we are catching all type of exception, because all these exceptions are inheriting this exception. Okay. If our code runs successfully without any exception, then in that case, we will run this else block. Like let's say, if there is no exception in the code, we can write there was no exception in the code, right? So in that case, we can use this else block. And this finally block will run in either of the case, even if there is exception or even if there is no exception. So in the both case, this final block will always run. So when can we use this final block? Let's say we have a DB connection open, and if there is any exception there, I want to close the DB connection. If I successfully read the data from the DB, in that case, I want to close the DB connection, then I can put that block of code in this finally block. So these are different types of exception in Python. So far, we have learned about built-in exception in Python. So in the next module, we'll learn about user-defined exception. So see you there.